It is another episode of the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Wes Cheng alongside Brad Bierman. Thanks so much for joining us on this Tuesday, May 6, 2025. We've got a lot to get to today. We begin today's show with Syracuse lacrosse. The Orange captured the 2025 ACC championship over the weekend, topping Duke 9-8 in a thriller on Sunday. Brad, you were there. You covered the tournament from press row. What did you see?
Well, I saw a Syracuse team, Wes, that put it together in spurts in both games, beating Notre Dame and Duke, and played some of the best lacrosse of the season during those spurts. Also saw a lot of typical play that we've also seen during the regular season: mistakes, missed shots, missed opportunities. But let's put the negative to the side for right now, because it shows a development, and the HHH, the trademark, of course, of the program, head, heart, and hustle. And I think it was on display, no doubt. In first, the win over Notre Dame, a team that maybe Syracuse is in the Irish's head now after 7 consecutive losses, having beaten Notre Dame twice, the two-time defending national champion. So certainly a lot to be said for the head part of it in that game, especially in the second half from where I saw it, Wes. And then in the championship game over Duke, a team that wore Syracuse down in Durham back on April 19th, a game I also attended. And that was the game afterwards that you really wondered, where was this team going? And then don't forget, it's only been about 10 days where most of the Syracuse fan base was wondering if the Gary Gate head coaching situation would continue after this season. So much has changed, and give credit to the coaching staff, really focused in on them during both of the victories. And Gary Gate lets his coaches coach. And I really think that's a mark of the program defensively, offensively, Pat March and John Odierda. And I just think it's fantastic how he oversees, rarely intercedes during the game, saves that for in the locker room at halftime. But overall, from goalie to the face-off to the attack, starting midfield and defense, put it all together and winning the ACC title.
Yeah, Brad. So just historically, the last time Syracuse competed for and won an ACC championship was 2016. So it's been almost a decade since Syracuse has been in this position. And looking at that game, it really started, as you mentioned, with the defense. And Jimmy McCool, incredibly impressive, recording 30 saves over the weekend and winning the most valuable player. And the defense in front of him, forcing 16 Duke turnovers. But I think the most impressive statistic to me was this: Syracuse won the ground ball battle 37-20 plus 17, showing that when the game came down to those 50-50 plays, Syracuse was all over it. And of course, it had to be the defense that had to hold on in the end. Duke had a chance to tie the game with 8 seconds left, but their shot goes wide on the net. And Brad, I know you want to get into this more. And as we know, Syracuse is going to host Harvard as a number 6 seed in the Dome this weekend. I actually think this is a great matchup for the Orange because they've seen Harvard before. They lost to them earlier in this year. And I think as a result of that, they're not going to overlook this Crimson team. I not only expect Syracuse to win this game and move on to the second round, I don't expect it to be that close because the focus is going to be razor sharp this week in practice.
I would certainly agree, Wes. I think the good news continued later Sunday night after Syracuse won the championship with that pairing. Talking to the folks at Syracuse before the bracket came out, they were figuring in the 5-6 range, knew they'd have a home game, and were wondering about the opponent if the committee was looking at rematches from the regular season. Well, they were, because Syracuse-Harvard is one of 3. So it's kind of a quirk this year. It happens. So there it is. And a great, I like the matchup at the face-off X to start things off with Johnny Mullen. I think he has a tremendous advantage there. He has had a great postseason so far, and it all starts there, getting those possessions and trying to make the most of them offensively, and that's going to set up your defense as the game progresses. And I think also Syracuse has the advantages you mentioned with McCool's play in the goal. And right there, those are kind of the bedrocks at both ends here, offensively setting that up, and then defensively. So love the matchup. As far as the score at this point, postseason can still be close. I do think Syracuse would pull away as you look at it at this point, certainly in the second half, to win and move on to face probably Princeton in a very tough quarterfinal game on Long Island.
So, Brad, we move on. Syracuse football had a busy week, especially on the offensive line. The Orange landing commitments from transfers Zach Rice, Cam Pringle, and TJ Ferguson As we know, Brad, Syracuse lost linemen to the portal and graduation this year. So what do you think of this week's Syracuse haul?
I kind of think now that we're seeing the mechanisms of what's going on in kind of the front offices of NFL teams now on the college level is how Syracuse is working the transfer portal, Wes. This is how I kind of see it as, of course, they have their own boards and their own prospects that they're looking at. They just happen to be current college players. And what really stands out to me is the schools that these players are coming from, their recruiting pedigree when they came out of high school, and then now coming to the Syracuse program, really intrigued by all three of these players and having a chance to watch, some film and then seeing some of the other reports we've had in our rivals.com database. And it's really great to see because Fran Brown knows it's in the trenches, right? In football, you have to win offensive and defensive lines, and he's going to do his best to fortify that, or you can't see the skilled players on both sides of the ball do their thing without it being taken care of in the trenches. So really love the size, the potential here, and these players fitting in. Can never have enough players on either side of the line, Wes.
Yeah, Brad. So to your point, these aren't FCS guys looking to make a transition to the FBS level. They aren't G5 players who got scouted over in high school. All three were high major prospects in every sense of the word. Rice was a 4-star recruit by Rivals, and Pringle and Ferguson were 5-star Rivals 250 recruits out of high school. So these are elite prospects that the Orange are bringing in. And it's worth noting, as you talked about, these are high major programs. So South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida State. Can I interest you in some of the talent from there? So, and if I could just take another 30 seconds here, Brad, I want to talk about Samaj Henry, 2026 offensive lineman committing to Syracuse over the weekend. He wanted me to pass along this message to Syracuse fans listening. He said that, quote, "I'm ready to work my tail off to add to the success," end quote. And said the biggest reason he committed to Syracuse was Fran Brown. So really a great week in the trenches for this group. Brad, again, it's pulling these high major prospects. You have to win in the trenches, as you said, and they're not only getting prospects from the portal that are going to contribute right away, but a guy like Henry who's going to contribute down the line, should he stay at Syracuse.
And we know the common denominator, like you said, Fran Brown, and certainly Dart fitting into all of these players, transfers from big programs scholastically or players that have been under-recruited.
So we're going to take a quick break. We've got more lacrosse on the way. When we return, SNY's Eamon McAnaney will join us. This is the Juice on the Cuse podcast. Back on the Juice on the Cuse podcast, Wes Cheng here with you, and we are thrilled as always to be joined by our great friend from SNY and City Lax, Eamon McAnaney. Eamon, how are you today? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing well. Always happy to talk Lax. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward for an exciting postseason.
Yeah, Eamon, definitely our favorite lacrosse guy to have on the podcast. I want to get you started on this one. After a few down years, Syracuse back as a contender. What do you think of the job that Gary Gate and his staff have done this year?
I think overall, they've done a great job. I mean, this is kind of what they've been building to with that great recruiter, junior recruiting class led by Joey Spallina. And, after they dominated Notre Dame in the Dome, you kind of got the feeling they were going to take off. I was a little surprised, how they took a step back after that, losing to Duke and North Carolina at home and Cornell in there as well. But, obviously they bounced back nicely to win the ACC tournament. They're going, which is huge. They're going into the NCAA tournament with a lot of momentum. So, you got to like the way they're playing right now. And like I said, this is sort of what they've been building to. There's been a few bumps in the road this year. The loss to Harvard at home kind of stands out, but, they're on track, right now, which is what you were expecting with this junior class.
Eamon, I'm so glad you mentioned the Harvard loss because it segues into my next question. They play Harvard on Sunday in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Do you see the return of death taxes in Syracuse in the Final Four on Memorial Day weekend? Is Syracuse a legitimate contender?
Well, they're definitely a legitimate contender. It's funny you mentioned that because after that loss, Jerry Byrne, the head coach at Harvard, who I know very well, he coached me when I was at Notre Dame back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. He said, Syracuse is back. They're a Final Four team. And I'm like, Jerry, they just lost to you guys at home. I'm not sure about that. But obviously, Jerry knows the talent, and, they all see the same players at the recruiting circle. So everyone knows what's been building at Syracuse. So, I think it's an interesting rematch. To go off on a little tangent here as a lacrosse fan, I hate the fact that there's so many rematches in the first round of the tournament. But that's a whole, bashing the committee is a whole other conversation for another day. But, look, I think if you're Syracuse, you got to get excited about a chance for payback.
Eamon, I wanted to pull back from Syracuse and look at the NCAA tournament. Cornell is the number 1 seed. Do you take them or the field?
Wow. What the heck? Let's take Cornell. Let's end the drought. Let's have CJ Kirsch join the likes of Tom Marino, Mike French, Eamon McAnaney, and lead Cornell to a championship. Let's do that. I think it's a toss-up, to be honest with you, because the field's pretty good. And I don't want to say Cornell hasn't been tested because, look, they beat a Syracuse team that just won the ACC tournament. Princeton they beat twice, who's a very good team. Their only loss, don't want to take anything away from Penn State, but was kind of a fluke. They were in complete control of that game until, crazy penalty late. So they answered, or they met every challenge in the regular season. Can they do it four more times and win it all? I think so. I think they're the best team for a while there. I thought Maryland was the best team in the country just because I thought they played a tougher schedule and they had bigger wins. But Cornell's going in with momentum and Maryland isn't. So, sure, I'll take the Big Red over the field.
Eamon, I've always loved that you're never afraid to take a position. So Cornell it is. And Eamon, we'll get you out of here on this one. You mentioned CJ Kirsch. Who do you think's been the best college lacrosse player this season? Is it him or someone else?
I mean, it's not even close, and we'll see it, at the TLO draft. It's C.J. Kirsten and everybody else. I mean, he shattered the career goals record. He's been a force in every game. Eye-popping pinball numbers against Yale. I think it was 9 goals. I forget the exact stats, but it was just an incredible shooting performance. So, I don't even think it's close. I think there was, an argument at the beginning of the season, who would be the top pick of the draft. Not really an argument, but would it be a debate? And clearly it's not. He's going to be pick number 1. He's going to win the Tewaaraton. All kudos to him. He's had an amazing career. He's working with my nonprofit, CityLax. So if you're a CJ Kirsch fan, look out on the internet to, help CJ with his GVs for NYC campaign. He's looking for fans to match him ground ball for ground ball. Sorry, I had to get that in there or I'd get fired. But, he's doing great things on and off the field. And I think he's a great ambassador for the sport and clearly by far the best player in the country.
Eamon, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming back on the program. Again, CityLax and SNY's Eamon McAnaney. Enjoy the NCAA tournament. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Eamon McAnaney, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a quick break, but still to come, Syracuse lands another player in the basketball portal. This is the Juice on the Cuse podcast.
Welcome back to the Juice on the Cuse podcast on the Rivals.com and Believe Networks with my longtime colleague, Wes Cheng. I'm Brad Bierman. And Wes, my final thought today, my closing thought, is about the Syracuse brand name. And I want to talk a little bit about that after seeing the Syracuse fans in attendance in Charlotte at the ACC Lacrosse Championship. Got to thinking, what a big base of Syracuse fans that have kind of migrated down from upstate New York and New York State in general, for that matter, down to the southeastern part of the U.S. And Syracuse lacrosse fans turn out in force. And it got me thinking that for the upcoming football season, we see what Fran Brown has developed here going into year number 2. And look at the platform Syracuse football is going to start off the Aflac kickoff game in Atlanta against Tennessee. I don't think there's, probably a bigger stage for the early season in college football than that. And that's going to extend that Syracuse brand name even further. And then looking at the basketball schedule, seeing, of course, this will be the first year of participation in that Players Era Festival in Las Vegas in November with all of those other big name programs. This is the season, of course, we're looking for Red Entree to get the program back into the NCAA tournament, back to national relevancy on the national stage to, again, extend the Syracuse basketball brand with Kion Anthony and Carmelo Anthony in the background. So really an important year, and lacrosse is certainly doing its part. So just thinking about the Syracuse brand name in the upcoming 25-26 college football, basketball, lacrosse seasons.
So, Brad, to piggyback off your point about basketball, I wanted to shift over to that sport for my closing thought. So, Tyler Betsy, former four-star forward, announcing he was transferring to Syracuse on Friday from Cincinnati. He only averaged 3.3 points and 1.5 rebounds for the Bearcats last season. He did appear in 34 games, but Syracuse needed some depth at small forward with only Nate Kings listed at that position. So, this is someone who can stretch the floor. He's regarded as a good shooter out of high school. He shot 32% from downtown in his freshman season. Not someone that's going to necessarily jump off the page per se, but an excellent depth piece for the Orange. They need to fill all those scholarships. If anything, again, he may not be playing big minutes, but this is someone who's going to contribute at practice and is going to push the players to be better. And again, if someone goes down, this is someone that you actually want getting more minutes. So I think this is a great addition for the Orange.
To your point, Wes, needed to fill out the roster, absolutely. And let's face it, when he was looking at destinations, Syracuse brand name isn't too bad, is it?
It's not. So that's it for us. For Brad Bierman, this is Wes Cheng. You've been listening to the Juice on the Cuse podcast presented by Believe in Rivals, and we will see you next time.